and the governor is just going to have to call a special session.
And two of the most articulate or best analysts of the budget, one is State Representative Brett Guyman, the other is C.B. Forgotston, who used to be the chief counsel for the Budget Committee in the House. They both, looking at the numbers, believe that there is a structural deficit, and that next year they may pass a budget this year that they say is balanced, but they're doing it in such a way that next year we'll have that the state would be facing an imbalance of at least $1 billion. And as Jim pointed out, with the cuts to higher education, it used to be that the state paid for about 2/3 of the cost for a student to attend one of the state's higher universities or colleges, and now that's down to about 1/3 that the state pays for. Now, in certain ways, it could be called a tax, where private individuals, students, families are now having to pick up that difference because of budget cuts.
Sure. Now, is Louisiana, are we going to have how much money we're going to have to cut this budget year, at least for next year? Are we looking at, you're saying there's not enough tax revenue, so what are we going to cut, or are we going to cut?
Well, they haven't. They will find a way to pass this year's, the budget for next year. And I should make an additional point, which is, the Louisiana, as Jim knows, runs on a fiscal year schedule that begins July 1st. So the state is on a schedule that's not the calendar year, but the beginning July 1st. So the year that ends June 30th, the state is also doesn't have enough money. And that can be worked out. That money would just be pushed over to, that deficit would just be pushed over to next year. But the state is facing big budget problems, and there are many people that I talk to in the legislature, and Jim may be hearing this as well, who believe that Governor Jindal is just trying to make sure he gets through to his term ends in 2016 without having to deal with a major problem, so he can focus on his national ambitions.
Sure. Now, also, as I appreciated, a lot of the funds have been depleted in terms of the slush funds, and am I correct about that, Tyler and Jim?
When you say slush funds, you mean as far as earmarks for specific nonprofit programs? That's been cut back dramatically, and it should be. There's just not the money there for that, and so all those earmarks came under great scrutiny. I give credit where credit's due. John Kennedy, the state treasurer, went ahead and specifically laid out those earmarks and showed to where there was no accountability, that the requirements under the law that financial documents be filed had not been met, and so thanks to the treasurer, there's been a great cutback. On the other hand, all those earmarks combined might have been $60, $70 million. In the scheme of a budget that is $27 billion, it's just not a lot of money, Steve. It's not going to make that much difference. Kennedy, by the way, also says we should come across and cut all these contracts to individuals and companies by 10%. That 10% would generate a significant amount of money. So all those ideas are going to be on the table if the worst happens, if the federal government turns us down, and Jindal will just be lying. Why are they picking on Louisiana? Well, Governor, let me tell you something. If you're watching this hangout, you can't sit there and pound the federal government day after day after day after day, then expect them to give you any special considerations. We've got this whole health care issue that's very complicated, to where Jindal's trying to get certain credit for funds or contracts the state's entered into to generate about $1 billion. The feds have said no right now. I don't think they're going to back off of that. But you know, when you've remember the golden rule, who's got the gold makes the rules, and we just haven't paid much deficits. Now, to hell with the federal government. We hear that rain all the time, but that's where a massive amount of money comes into the state of Louisiana. So Jindal's trying to play it both ways, and he just can't do it, quite frankly, Steve.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, you make a great point. Something called the Tax Foundation, which is an independent organization not in Louisiana, came out with a study, and that showed that as a percentage of the overall budget, Louisiana is number 2 and the percentage of its budget, of its overall state budget that comes from the federal government. Only Mississippi gets a higher percentage of its overall budget from the federal government. So
we're actually addicted to federal money, but we're telling the feds don't spend any money. Is that correct?
Well,
don't spend as much money.
It's just hard to keep biting the hand that feeds you, because as we know, there are politics in all these decisions. There's some discretion. You know, bureaucrats in Washington that hand out these billions of dollars have feelings just like we all do, and if they see, man, the state of Louisiana just keeps pounding us and pounding us and pounding us, now they want us to bend over backwards and help them with their applications. And so we're trying to have it both ways, and obviously it just hasn't worked out.